One lie destroyed his entire life, his career, reputation, and peace. But when he finally confronted the person who ruined him, the truth turned out far darker and sadder than anyone expected. I never thought I'd be writing this, but here we are. Sometimes the weight of something you didn't do can crush you even more than the guilt of something you did. A few years ago, I was accused of something that almost ruined my life. Something I didn't do, but that didn't stop people from believing it. For context, I was 26 at the time, working as a substitute teacher at a small middle school in Oregon. I loved that job. I wasn't even in it for the money. I genuinely liked helping kids, especially the quiet ones who reminded me of myself. I had just finished my teaching degree and was hoping to land a full-time position soon. I'd been at the school for about 6 months when everything started falling apart. There was this student, I'll call her Kayla, the sweet, shy 13-year-old who struggled a lot in class. She had trouble reading and would often stay after school for help. I always made sure the classroom door stayed open, and sometimes another teacher would be in the room, too. It was innocent. I wanted her to feel supported. Then one afternoon, out of nowhere, I got called into the principal's office. The principal, Ms. Gibson, had this unreadable look on her face. Sitting beside her was a woman from the district HR department. I remember my stomach dropping as soon as I walked in. They told me there had been a serious allegation. Kayla had told her parents that I made her uncomfortable. I froze. I asked what that meant. They wouldn't give details, just that the parents had filed a formal complaint and that an investigation was being opened. I was being placed on administrative leave, effective immediately. I remember standing there, my heart pounding so hard I could barely hear what they said next. I kept thinking, there's no way this is real. When I got home that day, I sat on the floor and just stared at the wall for hours. I couldn't eat, couldn't sleep, couldn't think. My mind kept looping. What did I do? Did I say something that could have been misinterpreted? Did I stand too close? Was I too friendly? But the truth was simple. I hadn't done anything. The next few weeks were hell. Word spread fast in small towns. I lived in a quiet neighborhood, the kind where everyone waves when they see you outside. Suddenly, the waves stopped. I'd go to the grocery store, and people would whisper, "Someone spray-painted perv on my car." I called my mom in tears. She didn't know what to say. My dad, a retired cop, told me to lawyer up. He said it didn't matter if I was innocent. Once an accusation like that exists, it sticks. The school launched a full investigation. They pulled my emails, texts, even my lesson plans. They interviewed other teachers, students, and parents. Meanwhile, I was stuck at home, replaying every moment in my head like some kind of horror film. Every smile, every word, every after-class conversation, I picked it apart, searching for what I could have done to deserve this. Then came the worst part. The police showed up. They weren't rude or aggressive, but they were cold, professional. They asked if I'd be willing to come in for a voluntary interview. My lawyer told me not to say a word without him. The interview was awful. They asked if I'd ever touched a student, if I'd ever had inappropriate thoughts. I wanted to scream, to rip my skin off. When I left the station, I sat in my car for an hour, shaking. I wasn't afraid of jail. I was afraid of never being seen as innocent again. It took 6 months. 6 months of being treated like a monster. 6 months of isolation, humiliation, and fear. And then, one afternoon, I got a call from my lawyer. The district had dropped the case. The police had closed their investigation. Apparently, Kayla's parents had pushed her to clarify her statement, and she finally admitted she never said I did anything inappropriate. She just told her mom that I made her nervous because I reminded her of her stepdad, who had hurt her in the past. She hadn't meant to accuse me of anything, but the damage was already done. By the time I was cleared, my reputation was destroyed. The school didn't want me back. Other schools refused to interview me. My landlord hinted that maybe I should move on, all because of something I didn't do. And the worst part, even though the truth came out, people still looked at me like I was hiding something. That's when I realized being innocent isn't enough once people have decided you're guilty. After the investigation ended, I thought things would slowly return to normal. I was wrong. You can clear your name on paper, but not in people's minds. When the news broke that the case was closed, it wasn't written as false accusation. The local paper simply said, "District closes investigation into teacher misconduct." That one line kept me branded forever. People love a scandal, but they hate admitting they were wrong about one. Even my parents started acting differently. Mom tried to be supportive, but she avoided eye contact. Dad kept saying, "You need to get out of town for a while." It was his way of saying he didn't trust that the damage was fixable. I lost friends too. A few coworkers sent short messages, "hang in there." Others just ghosted me completely. The guy who used to invite me to poker nights suddenly forgot to text me. The teachers' Facebook group quietly removed me. I tried to apply for new teaching positions in nearby districts, but every interview ended the same way. The principal would smile politely, thank me for coming in, and I'd get an email 2 days later, We've decided to move forward with other candidates. I wasn't stupid. I knew what was happening. Background checks don't list false allegations, but small-town networks talk. The education world is tight-knit. Once your name is tainted, it spreads like wildfire. Money ran low. I had savings, but 6 months of unemployment, legal fees, and therapy drained almost all of it. I ended up taking a night shift at a warehouse, stacking boxes, just to keep my apartment. Every time I'd lift another package, I'd think about how I used to lift textbooks for my students, how I'd once had purpose. Sleep was a mess. My mind wouldn't stop replaying the moment I was called into the principal's office. Ms. Gibson's flat tone, the HR lady's blank expression, my hands gripping the edge of the chair. Sometimes, I'd wake up drenched in sweat, hearing phantom whispers, "That's him, the teacher." I developed this paranoia whenever I went out. I'd walk into a coffee shop and feel eyes on me. I didn't know if people actually recognized me or if it was all in my head, but the fear was real. The shame was constant. Therapy helped a little, but even there, I found myself defending things I hadn't done, as if I had to convince everyone, even strangers, that I wasn't a monster. My therapist once said something that stuck with me: "You're carrying a crime that never happened. You're trying to serve time for something that doesn't exist." That broke me, because she was right. 6 months after everything ended, I ran into Kayla's mom at the grocery store. She froze when she saw me holding her shopping basket like a shield. I didn't say anything. I just walked past her. But as I turned the corner, I heard her whisper to another woman, "That's him." My heart stopped. I wanted to scream that her daughter lied, that they destroyed my career, my peace, my life. But I didn't. I just stood there, pretending to look at canned soup until my hands stopped shaking. That night, I packed a duffel bag and drove. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there anymore. I ended up 3 hours south, in a small coastal town I'd never been to before. I rented a cheap room over a diner, the kind of place that smelled like coffee and sea salt. Nobody knew me there. Nobody whispered. For the first time in almost a year, I could breathe. But even as I started rebuilding, the anger never left. Because deep down, I still wanted accountability from the school, from the parents, from someone. Instead, I was left with silence. And silence, I've learned, can be the loudest punishment of all. The first few months in the coastal town were quiet, almost too quiet. I got a job washing dishes at the diner below my rented room. The owner, an older woman named Linda, didn't ask questions. She just pointed to the back and said, "Apron's on the hook. Don't break the plates." For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel judged. People there didn't know who I was. They just saw some guy trying to get by. That anonymity felt like a luxury. I'd wake up to the sound of seagulls instead of my phone buzzing with news alerts or angry texts. I started walking the beach at night, just me, the waves, and the kind of silence that doesn't accuse you. I told myself I was healing. I even started to believe it. But trauma doesn't care about new zip codes. Every time a young girl came into the diner with her family, my stomach twisted. If she laughed too loud or waved at me, my brain immediately went to panic mode. What if someone misinterprets that? What if another rumor starts? I'd retreat to the kitchen, scrubbing plates until my knuckles bled. One night, a teenage waitress dropped a tray of drinks near the counter. Instinctively, I rushed to help her clean it up. She smiled and said, "Thanks, mister." It was such an innocent moment, but when I saw Linda watching from the corner, I froze. My chest tightened, my throat went dry. She wasn't judging me, not really, but all I saw in her eyes was suspicion. That's the thing about false accusations. Even when no one's accusing you anymore, you still live like they are. Eventually, I saved enough to rent a small studio apartment, one window, one bed, one flickering ceiling light. I tried dating again, briefly. Met a woman named Jenna from a local bookstore. She was kind, gentle, always laughing. But every time she'd ask personal questions, "Where did you grow up? What did you used to do?" I'd shut down. I couldn't tell her the truth. Who would stay after hearing that story? I lied. Told her I'd left my teaching job because of burnout. It wasn't entirely untrue, I guess. Just not the full story. We lasted about 2 months before she said, "You're a good man, but you feel haunted." She wasn't wrong. I spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering if Caleb, the girl who lied, never thought about what she did. Did she regret it? Did she even remember my name? Or was I just another story her family buried to protect her image? Sometimes I fantasized about confronting her, walking up to her years later, calm and collected, just to see if she'd look me in the eye. But I knew I'd never do it. Not because I didn't want to, but because I was terrified of becoming that guy. The one who couldn't move on. There were moments, though, when I almost felt normal again. Linda started trusting me with closing shifts. I'd stay late, mop the floors, listen to the radio, and imagine that maybe this quiet life could be enough. Until one afternoon, everything cracked open again. A man in a suit came into the diner, ordered coffee, and started chatting with Linda. When I came out of the kitchen to drop off plates, he looked up at me and froze. "Mr. Lawson," he said. My blood went cold. I hadn't heard that name spoken in over a year, not since the investigation. He smiled awkwardly. "You used to teach at Willow Creek High, right?" I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. I just muttered, "No, you're mistaken," and went straight to the back. That night, I packed a bag. Again, Linda begged me to stay. Said nobody cared who I used to be, but she didn't understand. It wasn't about them caring, it was about me never being free. I left before sunrise. And as I drove down that empty coastal road, headlights cutting through the fog, I realized something terrifying. Even when you're innocent, once the world has painted you as a monster, you spend the rest of your life trying to prove you're human. 5 years passed before I heard her name again. 5 years of small towns, night shifts, short-term rentals, and changing my phone number every few months. I'd stopped being Daniel Lawson and started being Dan Reed, a man with no past and no future, just the space in between. But then, one night, it all came crashing back. It started with a message on an old social media account I hadn't checked in years. The notification popped up while I was borrowing a library computer, a tiny red dot blinking like a wound reopening. The message was from an unfamiliar name. "Megan H. I think we need to talk about what happened to Kale." I stared at it for a full minute before I could even breathe. My pulse hammered in my ears. Kale. I hadn't heard that name since the day everything fell apart. I hesitated, fingers hovering over the keyboard. Every rational part of me screamed not to answer. But curiosity, or maybe masochism, won out. "Who are you?" She replied almost immediately. "I was her best friend." "I know what she said about you wasn't true." I felt my stomach twist. I wanted to believe her, but I'd been burned too badly to trust anyone connected to that world. Still, I agreed to meet her at a diner halfway between her town and mine. Neutral ground. She showed up early. Mid-20s, nervous, clutching a cup of coffee like it was armor. When I walked in, she stood, eyes widening like she was seeing a ghost. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said softly. "I wasn't sure I should," I admitted. We sat. The silence between us was heavy, the kind of silence that knows too much. Then she said it. Kayla lied because her stepdad found her messages with an older guy. She panicked. Said it was her teacher, you, because she thought he'd never question it if she blamed you. I froze. "What messages?" Megan looked down. "Some college guy she met online." She thought he was 18, but he was actually 27. Her stepdad caught her phone, lost his mind, and she said your name to get out of it. My breath left me in pieces. She ruined my life. To protect the predator. Tears filled Megan's eyes. She told me the truth a year later. Said she wanted to confess, but her parents said it would destroy the family. They moved. Changed schools. Her mom made her swear to never mention it again. For a moment, I couldn't feel my hands. My heartbeat roared in my skull. Every sleepless night, every job lost, every glance of suspicion, all because of one panicked lie. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw the table across the room. But instead, I just sat there, numb. "She's married now," Megan added quietly. "Got a kid, I think." I think she tries not to think about what she did, but I couldn't live with it anymore. "You deserve to know," I nodded, barely hearing her. That night, I didn't sleep. I drove aimlessly until sunrise, then parked by the ocean and watched the waves crash against the rocks, the same ocean that had once felt like peace. Now it felt mocking. I had the truth, but what did it change? I couldn't get my old life back. My career, my reputation, my name, all gone. And she got to grow up, move on, build a family, while I lived like a fugitive for something I didn't do. For weeks, I toyed with the idea of confronting her. I even found her Facebook profile, happy pictures of her and her husband, her little boy, birthday parties, smiles. It was like she'd rewritten her entire story, erased me completely. But one photo stopped me cold. It was of her son, maybe 6 years old, holding a toy guitar and grinning. He looked exactly like she did at that age, innocent, and touched by the kind of guilt she'd buried. And for some reason, I closed the page. I realized then that destroying her wouldn't give me my life back, it would just make me like her. Someone who breaks others to save themselves. So, I wrote everything down, every memory, every lie, every truth. Not for revenge, but for closure. Maybe one day, I'll publish it anonymously. Maybe someone out there will read it and understand how fragile a person's entire world can be. But for now, this is all I can say. The worst thing about being falsely accused isn't the punishment, it's the silence that follows when the truth finally surfaces, and no one's left to hear it. 2 months after that meeting with Megan, I drove 6 hours back to the town I swore I'd never see again. The place looked smaller somehow. The school where I used to teach now had new paint, a new sign, and probably new ghosts. Kayla still lived nearby. Her address wasn't hard to find. Public records are cruel like that. For weeks, I kept her street pinned on my GPS but never hit start. Every time I almost did, my chest tightened. What would I even say? You destroyed my life. But hey, how's the family? But then one night, I saw a post on her Facebook page. It was for a local fundraiser of her son's little league team, raising money for uniforms. She'd written, teaching my son the importance of community. That word, teaching, hit me like a punch. So I went. The park was crowded with families, kids chasing soccer balls, laughter in the air that didn't belong to me. I stood near the edge of the field, invisible among the parents, until I saw her. She looked older, soft around the eyes, a few gray strands in her hair. She was talking to another mom, smiling like someone who'd never broken a life in half. For a moment, I almost turned around. Then she saw me. The smile fell. Her entire face drained of color. She froze mid-sentence, lips parting like a ghost had just stepped out of the past to which, in a way, I had. Kayla, I said quietly when she finally walked toward me, each step slow and careful, like approaching a cliff's edge. Mr. Lawson, she whispered, voice trembling. Oh my God. I didn't think I'd ever, yeah, I said. Neither did I. We stood there for what felt like forever. Kids shouted behind us, a whistle blew. Parents clapped to the sound of normal life spinning around the eye of the storm. I know why you're here, she finally said, eyes glistening. Do you? Her breath caught. Megan told me she talked to you. I told her not to. Of course you did. Tears filled her eyes now. I was a kid. I didn't know what I was doing. You were 16, I interrupted, my voice shaking. Old enough to know the difference between lying and destroying someone's life. She flinched. I didn't raise my voice, but every word landed like a stone between us. I lost everything, I continued. My job, my friends, my reputation. I lived like a criminal for years. And you got to grow up. You got to forget. I didn't forget, she said hoarsely. Not for a single day. I see your face every time I look in the mirror. I wanted to come forward, but my mom, I cut her off again. Don't blame your mom. You made the choice. You said my name. Her voice broke. I'm sorry. I swear I'm so sorry. I think about it every night. I even tried to find you once, but you didn't try hard enough. She covered her face, sobbing quietly. For a moment, I almost pitied her, almost. I didn't come here for an apology, I said. I came here because I needed to see if you still had a soul. And I think you do. That's enough. She looked up, shocked. You're not going to tell anyone? I shook my head. No, I'm done being tied to what you did. You'll have to live with it. I already have. Before she could answer, a small voice called out behind her, Mom. Her son ran up, clutching a baseball glove, beaming up at her. Coach says I'm pitching next. Kayla wiped her eyes quickly, forcing a smile. That's great, honey. He turned to me. Hi, are you my mom's friend? I hesitated. Then I nodded. Something like that. He grinned. Cool, you gonna watch the game? I smiled weakly. Maybe next time. And with that, I left. I walked back to my car, my chest hollow but strangely light. The sun was setting, the air filled with the sound of kids laughing, the kind of sound that once made me ache, but now felt almost peaceful. I didn't forgive her. Not really. But I stopped letting her own my pain. Maybe that's what forgiveness actually is, not saying it's okay, but saying, you don't get to control me anymore. I drove for hours after leaving that park, no music, no destination, just the road and the hum of my old truck. Somewhere along the highway, the weight in my chest started to loosen, like I'd finally put down a suitcase I didn't realize I'd been carrying for years. For the first time since everything happened, I didn't feel like that teacher. I was just Daniel, a man who made mistakes, but not the monster they painted me as. When I got home, I didn't tell Megan what happened right away. She deserved peace, not more ghosts from the past. Instead, I sat on my porch, watching the sky turn violet and gold, and realized how much of my life I'd spent waiting for other people to give me closure. But closure doesn't come from confessions. It comes from deciding to live again. I started teaching again, not in a school, but through a community center. Kids who'd been expelled, suspended, or just written off by the system. No grades, no principles, no bureaucracy. Just lessons, trust, and time. The first day, a teenage boy named Caleb slumped into the room, hood up, headphones in. He didn't look at anyone. When I asked him what he wanted out of the program, he shrugged and said, nothing. My mom made me come. I smiled, because I'd seen that same defiance in hundreds of kids before. That's fine, I told him. You can sit there and hate it, or you can stay and prove me wrong. He stayed. Weeks turned into months, and that small classroom started to feel like a heartbeat again. I saw laughter, growth, kids who'd been told they were problems suddenly realizing they were just people who needed someone to listen. One day, Caleb stayed after class and said, Mr. Lawson, why do you care so much? Teachers don't usually stick around for guys like me. I hesitated before answering. Because someone once decided I was the bad guy without even knowing me. I swore I'd never do that to anyone else. He nodded slowly, like he understood more than he could say. That night, I told Megan about seeing Kayla. She didn't say anything at first, I just listened, her eyes full of quiet understanding. "Do you feel better?" she finally asked. "I feel free," I said. She smiled softly. "Then maybe that's enough." And it was. Months later, I got a letter, no return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was shaky, but I recognized it immediately. "I don't expect you to ever forgive me, but I needed you to know that I told the truth to the board. I sent them everything. It's too late to undo what I did, but maybe it's not too late for you to get your name back." Hale, I never found out what came of that letter. Maybe it reached someone. Maybe it didn't, but I didn't need it to. I already had my name back, not on paper, but in the way I stood taller, in the way I taught again, in the way I stopped hiding from mirrors. The funny thing about being falsely accused is that it burns away everything that isn't real: friends, pride, illusions. What's left is something quieter, tougher. I used to think surviving meant proving everyone wrong. Now I know it just means waking up, taking a breath, and choosing to keep going. That's the part no one tells you about redemption. It doesn't roar. It whispers. And if you listen closely, you realize it's been there all along.